Angela Rayner admitting she underpaid 40,000 quid in stamp duty on her £800,000 flat. She is, of course, rather inconveniently for her, the Housing Secretary, as well as being the Deputy Prime Minister, referred herself to the independent advisor on ministerial standards. She said she even considered quitting over this. Let's have a listen to what she said earlier to Sky News.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people, but because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the Ministerial Code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Now, there are many problems with this. One is what many are saying, the hypocrisy of her position, a long-time critic, of course, of Tory sleaze. Let's have a listen to her just under 2 years ago, in fact, having a right old pop at former Chancellor and Tory MP Nadeem Zahawi over his tax affairs. Here's what she said.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
That was one of many comments Rayner made over the years about the evil, wicked, money-grabbing Tories. Kevin Schofield with us, political editor, HuffPost UK. Is she in trouble?
I think she's definitely in trouble. I mean, I think you pointed out a couple of things. There's the hypocrisy element. Yep. There's the fact, you know, as you just said there, Ian, that, you know, she was very much in the vanguard. Whenever there was any Tory sleaze, Angela Linehan was out there, real attack dog, having a go at
100%.
And also the fact that she's Housing Secretary. That obviously makes it very difficult for her, I think, maybe to continue in that
role. Well, you might
role.
think that, you know, if there was any way you could get advice on on what to do in kind of like tricky home transactions, you know, there'd be a lawyer probably maybe in the opposite office opposite her. You go, yeah, Barry, what do we? You've got this trust thing. What do we? You know, you might think you'd have access to that.
She, more than most, you would think, would be able to get the best advice. Now, she has referred herself to the Ministerial Code Watchdog. Now it's out of her hands. It's, you know, she'll be interviewed by Laurie Magnus, and his verdict will be crucial, really. If he gives it the thumbs down, then she's in an awful lot of trouble. And it's difficult for Keir Starmer as well, because there's only a couple of days ago they had this big shake-up. It was in number 10. There's going to be, this is phase 2 of the government.
Phase 2.
And 48 hours later, you know, they're caught in another sleaze row.
So, have I got this right, Kevin? So the claim is that the house she lived in her constituency, in Ashton, was put into a trust. So because it was put into a trust, therefore it didn't, what she bought in Brighton wasn't really a second property in the conventional sense.
Basically, yeah, and the reason that they had this rather unusual arrangement in the house in Ashton under Lyme is because her and her husband had divorced. Yep. But they wanted the children, including one of the children who's disabled, to stay in the house because that was their home. They didn't want the upheaval. And they then agreed that they'd basically split the parenting. The husband would do half the week and Angela would do the other half. Now, it would appear, and this is where it gets even more complicated, that she sold her share in the house to the trust. And that allowed her to freed up money to allow her to buy this place in Hove. Now, as you say, she then thought that would become her primary residence.
Because she said, I've only got one mortgage.
Exactly.
Which is the one in Hove.
Absolutely. And she received legal advice to that effect. It now transpires, she says that this legal advice was wrong, and that for tax purposes, the primary residence remained the one in her constituency. Now, I think it's all going to hinge on what she told this lawyer who gave her the first piece of advice. Yeah. If it turns out that she hasn't given this lawyer all the relevant information, in order to give her the best possible advice, then she's in trouble. And then we have to look at what the advice was that he gave her and find out if she followed that advice to the letter, because at the moment she's blaming that lawyer effectively for dropping her in it. And so there's still many
You'd think
questions.
that would be, you know, in this world it would be quite easy to establish this. You know, there'd be a paper trail, an email that said, oh, by the way, Barry, I don't know why everyone's called Barry in this story. By the way, Barry, the man in charge at the housing department, the lawyer, they're all Barrys. By the way, what can you tell me what? Because you know, if I was buying somewhere, you know, you want to, you get a bill, don't you? You get there's many discussions. What's it going to cost? What am I likely to pay in stamp duty?
Yeah. Especially when there's so much money at stake. You know, there's. It's £40,000 effectively that she may well have underpaid. I mean, she's admitted in that interview that she did underpay not council tax, stamp duty. Because the house in Hove is actually her second residence rather than her primary residence. So it's all very embarrassing.
But if she did sell the previous house in Ashton-under-Lyme to the trust, then you might say, well, she's in the clear then. Well, I think she has only got one house.
Yeah, well, I think it would appear that's the advice that she was given initially, but because of this unusual trust arrangement, that I think makes it less clear cut, and that's why she's had this legal counsel has given her a second opinion to say, actually, by the letter of the law, that remains your primary residence because of the existence of this trust. That means that you're still. Basically, you're still the owner. You're an owner.
You've sold some of it to the trust,
house,
and the trust is actually your trust.
That's the way it would appear. Yeah. Even though she's only got one mortgage, she says, on this property that she bought this year near Brighton. In actual fact, for tax purposes, the house in Ashton-under-Lyme is still her primary residence.
Why is there not in place? When we see so many of these stories over the years that are kind of relate, whether it's sort of tax arrangements that Nadeem Zahawi's story that she referred to and attacked him for, things like this. Does the Cabinet Secretary not sort of sit everybody down and go, right, if you're going to go on holiday or buy a house, you come here first. We will take care of your details. Yeah. We will cross-check every scintilla of whatever you filled out. You'd think that would be in place for to avoid exactly this.
Yeah, I mean, that would be one possible solution to it, because there's no doubt that I think politicians in particular are rightly held to a very high standard, but especially cabinet ministers, because they are, you know, they decide on the laws effectively that we have to follow. And if they step out of line even by 1 inch, then they're in an awful lot of trouble. And clearly, I think she is in an awful lot of trouble. She probably wishes now that there was an arrangement and some way to take it out of her hands and leave it in someone else's.
You almost want a kind of, I don't know, a form-filling czar that works with the cabinet. Barry, who could go, Barry, I've got this form to fill out. There's a bit of a stamp duty choice. I've got A, B or C. Do I tick A, or should I go B, or could I get away with a moody C? And
it's,
but I mean, there isn't.
Well, no, clearly not. And she is in a bit of bother. And as I said, her fate is now effectively out of her hands. Now, Keir Starmer stood by her at Prime Minister's Questions today. He kind of had to. He had no option other than to stand by it. But that, if the facts were to change and it found that she had broken the ministerial code in some way, ultimately be up to the Prime Minister then to decide whether or not to sack her. Now, Boris Johnson, if you remember, decided to stand by Priti Patel when she was found to have broken the ministerial code, and Labour were very critical of Boris Johnson for doing 100%. That. So it would be quite tricky.
So you could break the code and still keep your job, of course.
Absolutely. It's ultimately it's up to the Prime Minister.
And those that examine the potential breach, are they fiercely independent? I mean,
absolutely.
They're not like Starmer's mate.
No, absolutely not. They have found against ministers in the past, so they investigate this without fear or favour. In fact, I think sometimes they've been accused of erring on the other side to avoid any accusations of non-independence. They can be actually tougher than they might otherwise have been. So she's. I'd be very worried.
I've just remembered, I did hear a story this morning, by the way, completely separate to this, that Kemi Badenoch's educational CV is in a bit of question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just occurred to me that she'd apparently said that she was, you know...
It was Stanford, wasn't it?
Stanford. She'd been given a sort of like an offer at a university when she was only 16. And apparently none of that is true. I'm going to take a guess it was a Guardian journalist that put this together.
It may well be, but if it's true, then it's embarrassing.
Because this is in the kind of Rachel Reeves
exactly.
CV department.
The Tories have had a lot of fun with Rachel Reeves' CV, so it'd be very embarrassing if Kevin Badenoch's in the same boat.
Well, the last I heard was that Tory HQ was standing by it and saying, no, there's nothing to see here.
I think they're more worried about the fact that Kevin Badenoch flunked it again at PMQ.
Well, yeah, how did she do? Was it not?
Well, clearly, so this story dropped at 11:20.
You were there, of course, in the press gallery.
Yeah, so it dropped at 11:20, which, 40 minutes, not a lot of time, but it should be enough time for you to rustle up 6 questions to hammer Keir Starmer on it. Her first question, she got up, she referred to Angela Rayner, and I'm like, all right, here we go, and then veered off and started talking about gilt yields and the high cost of government debt, which is obviously important.
It's important, but no, go on Angela Rayner, right?
Well, quite.
I mean,
but that
all
was
your questions.
Yeah, absolutely, but that was obviously what she'd prepared. And she didn't have...
That's a daft thing to do.
Yeah,
who's advising?
No one could believe it, really. A good leader of the opposition would have rubbed their hands and thought, right, let's get absolutely stuck in here. But she just didn't.
By the way, Kemi Badenoch has insisted she was offered a place at Stanford University, aged 16, after the university's admissions officer at the time said her claim was untrue. And I think the detail of that was that they would say, well, we just don't offer these places to 16-year-olds. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's quite unusual if they... unless you're some child genius.
And then I think in the meantime, she went on to college to do her A-levels.
Yeah,
think, well,
seems a bit odd.
Interesting. Let's just very briefly talk about Nigel Farage. Very, very upset about Graham Linehan's arrest, as many people are. That's fair enough. He's going to be appearing before the US Congress to testify in a free speech investigation. It's interesting. He's been invited to attend this. This will be... you know what came straight to my mind when I think of British politicians attending... You know exactly what
I know what you're going to say. George Galloway.
George Galloway, who gave one of the most indefatigable, whatever the word was.
Indefatigable.
Indefatigable.
It was a tour de force.
It was an incredible speech. It's online if you ever want to have a look at a British politician in action in a foreign jurisdiction. Then check out George Galloway's evidence to Congress.
He said this is the mother of all stitch-ups, I think.
The mother of all stitch-ups, I was trying to stop them buying oil, but you, congressman,
it was
were
great.
selling them. It was all of that.
He's such a talented guy. I mean,
he was a brilliant guy at that kind of stuff.
Talented orator, very talented.
Indeed. Anyway, so along comes Nigel Farage in a similar capacity, but without all the indefatigable malarkey, I'm sure, unless he's going to throw that in just for, old time's sake, maybe he will. But he's going to talk about the... I mean, again, this line that America have developed and continue to develop, J.D. Vance heading it up, that, free speech is a bit dead in the UK. Elon Musk chimes in on all of these stories. Keir Starmer always goes, we have had free speech for a long time, and it doesn't really wash. This is going to stir the hornet's nest a little more.
It is, undoubtedly. The problem, though, that Nigel Farage has got is that his reform councillors in Nottingham have banned the local paper because they wrote a disobliging story, and they've stopped speaking to the local paper. So it doesn't feel very free speechy to me
it doesn't.
when you do that. Which again is one of those things where now that they're in power, they have a record to defend, and they are there to be held accountable.
100%.
So that's the difficulty. That's the difficulty for me. I can totally get why he wants to talk about Graham Linehan, Lucy Conley, all that stuff. But while your own politicians are banning journalists, I think that's a bit of a difficult one.
And also, it should be said that this is in a country that the president announced you'd go to jail for a year for burning the flag. The last time somebody went to jail for burning a flag, I think, was in Thailand, and they had their toes shot off as well. So
just for good measure.
Just a good measure, to make sure you don't go mooching around the place too much with your swan vesta or whatever. But I mean, that was, I don't like people burning flags. I think it's a bit, it's an act of arson, you could argue that point. It always looks a bit silly and juvenile to me, but I'm not sure I want to send people to jail for it.
No, absolutely. It's a freedom of expression.
Freedom of expression, right?
It doesn't feel very American, really.
It certainly doesn't. Kevin, thank you. Good to see you.
Nice
Kevin
to see you.
Schofield is the political editor of HuffPost UK.